So yesterday was a very eventful first Sunday of the NFL season, and I want to give some of my biggest takeaways. I'll touch on the Steelers and Aaron Rodgers. Is it panic time for the Lions in Detroit after what happened in Green Bay? There are major issues in Miami with the Dolphins. We'll talk Ravens as well as Bengals. If you want more NFL content in the future throughout the season, feel free to subscribe to the channel down below. You can also follow me on Twitter at LukeBeller3. So first off with Aaron Rodgers, I think that this idea that some people had that Rodgers was somehow going to come in this season and be washed and not be able to make this Steelers team competitive, I just thought that was not going to be anywhere close to the reality. And one of the biggest reasons I thought that Rodgers coming into Pittsburgh was a smart move was because of what they have defensively. And the interesting thing yesterday is that the defense didn't really show up. I mean, they allowed a total of 32 points to the Jets and Justin Fields. They did have some big plays there at the end with, Jalen Ramsey making a nice, massive tackle there. But it was really Aaron Rodgers playing very, very good football. I think better than a lot of people expected they would see, especially here in week 1. He goes 4 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, and he more so looks like the Aaron Rodgers of old. There are some really nice plays, really nice throws. And I think for Rodgers, being 40-plus years old now, there are questions about if he can sort of get back to that previous level he had, because I thought to myself, if the Steelers can just get 70 to 80% of the 2020-2021 MVP Aaron Rodgers, then they really will have a chance in the AFC. And I think that we saw that yesterday. I'd say maybe not the same when it comes to his ability to escape the pocket, things like that, but otherwise throwing the ball, some of these deep throws, there were a lot of short passes, but there were a few deep throws here or there. I think that with what we saw from Rodgers yesterday in this game, the Steelers do have a shot. The one concern here is the defense because, as I said, the reason I thought it was a good pairing was because they had a really good defense. And, you don't want Rodgers to have to carry you, even though he in a way did in this one. But I think that, week 1, first game back, sometimes things just don't work out there defensively. But I mean, the Steelers defense allowed 182 rushing yards, 4.7 yards a carry. And so I think it's very promising if you're a Steelers fan. You have to think to yourself, man, if we can get this kind of Aaron Rodgers, sure, he won't throw 4 touchdowns every game. But if he's playing at this level, then it bodes very, very well for the Steelers and their chances in the NFL this season. And I thought before the season they'll make the playoffs, and seeing Rodgers playing there, I still believe that, and I think we're going to see this defense start to bounce back in the coming weeks. Now to Detroit. All last season, the Detroit Lions lost 2 games in the regular season, going 15-2. And now already they're starting off 0-1, half of the losses they had last season. They get really honestly destroyed by the Green Bay Packers. And I think that there were some issues, offensively, especially the offensive line with Detroit. Of course, they lost Pro Bowl center Frank Ragnow. They also lost Kevin Zeitler as well at guard. And so there were some questions there coming into this game in the interior of this line. And it just wasn't very pretty all day long. The Packers defensive line was dominating against the run, and then they sacked Jared Goff 4 different times. And I think for a Lions offense that was, so explosive last year, you didn't see any of that in this game. When the Lions were moving the ball, there was tons of short passes, and there are a few deep balls here or there, but the Packers defense really held them in check. And I honestly think this more so has to do with how good the Packers defense played than maybe major problems in Detroit. I think that the Packers have an elite defense with Micah Parsons, and they showed that yesterday. They totally shut down the run. There were questions without Kenny Clark. Can the Packers defense still play well against the run? They did in this game. And so I think in the NFC North, the Packers are going to be a very, very tough team to stop. And I don't think that the Lions are that much better, because last year I think they're clearly better than the Vikings, better than the Packers. The Lions beat the Packers both times last season. But things have shifted in the NFC North with what we saw from the Packers defense yesterday. And I think for Detroit, there are questions, new coordinators, both sides of the ball. My question is, how much of this was on the coordinator? How much was it on the interior offensive line? Or how much was it just on the fact that the Packers defense was playing top-tier football? I wouldn't be surprised if when the Lions play, upcoming games this season against, lower-tier defenses, I think they'll still be fine. But I just think this has a large part to do with just how good the Packers defense was. You have Micah Parsons there. There was one play against Penei Sewell. Parsons doesn't sack Goff, but he gets there so fast that Goff just throws a pick to Evan Williams there. And so do I think it's panic time? I don't think it's panic time. I think that we see lots of times in the NFL, week one, some teams just come out, put up an absolute dud, which the Lions did here, mostly offensively, even though first half the Lions defense did struggle there. I still think they're going to be a good team, but if this starts to show up against defenses that maybe aren't quite as talented, that's where I think I'd get a little bit concerned if you were a Detroit Lions fan. Now moving on to Joe Burrow and the Bengals. It was a really interesting way for this game to go just because of the talk all offseason about, the Bengals really needing to get better on defense. Their defense really held them back last season. Joe Burrow was dominant last year. They had one of the best offenses in the NFL, and yet it was the defense that sort of carried them in this game. They barely lost. The Bengals barely won this game 17-16, and it was mainly the offense struggling. They started off fast, scored touchdowns on 2 of the first 3 drives, and then they just totally stunk it up the rest of the game. Burrow was 3 for 9 for 25 yards in the second half and was sacked 3 different times. And if it wasn't for the Browns just doing what the Browns are very good at doing, just making, playing bad when it matters most, the Browns missed the game-winning field goal with 2 minutes remaining. And so if it wasn't for that field goal being missed, there's a very good chance you're sitting here with the Bengals once again starting off 0-1, the offense starting slow. And so while, the end result, awesome, you're 1-0, must feel good. But when you look deeper, I'm like, the way this offense started, that's very concerning for this Bengals offense. Now, I think that Joe Burrow's too talented, Jamar Chase is too talented, T. Higgins, Chase Brown. I think they have too many talented weapons for this to be any kind of theme. And so I expect to see them, bounce back. I just don't see them putting up performances like this in the future. Just when you have this much talent offensively, there's no way this continues. So I guess it's a good sign for the Bengals, the fact that the defense did play well, because I think that was probably the major concern here. But offensively, you can't have things like this happen, and especially when you're paying Joe Burrow the money you're paying him, Chase, T. Higgins. You expect a lot more for them, so they need to improve in the coming games. Now to the Dolphins, Miami Dolphins. There are some major problems here in Miami. Mike McDaniel now in his 4th season here, going into his 4th season, and when you put up a performance like this against the Colts, who played really good football, I don't think many people looked at this Colts team and said, man, we better watch out for them this season, even though they played well. And so, it makes it even worse for Tua, this offense. Tua goes 11 of 23 for 114 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 picks, only 8 points. It was an all-time bad performance. And it really, to start off this way, it just feels like things are really going downhill in Miami. And I think we've seen in the past what this Dolphins offense can be at their best. And when they're at their best, they had that season in 2023. I think they're like the second best scoring offense. But even in that season, against some of the top-tier defenses, they didn't show up the same. And I think for me, when I saw the Dolphins pay Tua the kind of money they paid him last year in 2024, paying him $50+ million, I understand the quarterback market. I understand that as these guys, continue to pass each other in the market, when the salary cap keeps rising, you have to pay quarterbacks a ton of money to try to keep them around. I just thought to pay Tua $50+ million was a poor decision, because I think when you look at the rest of the AFC, especially, you look at Mahomes, you look at Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, a lot of these top-tier quarterbacks, Tua is just not at that level, and I just think it was going to be very hard for him ever to beat multiple of those guys come playoff time, and that's why in my mind, I thought it probably wasn't wise to pay him $50+ million, and I think that's a tough spot to be in as an organization when you're having to make those decisions. Just because, what was their other option? Just moving on from Tua, even though you had, one of the best offenses in the NFL. Then if you move on from Tua, then you're totally in no man's land. You have to go find another quarterback. And the odds of you finding someone, like a Josh Allen, Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, the odds are low. And so I get organizations, when they're looking at, we want to be competitive, we want to have a good roster, at least have a chance at the playoffs, Tua gives you a chance. I mean, he can get you in the playoffs. I just think that he's not going to get you to a Super Bowl. And so that's why when you have to pay that much money, it's like, it's a tough decision there. And so I think here in Miami, Mike McDaniels is in a very tough spot. We'll see if they can bounce back. If they can't and things keep going like this, it wouldn't be a shock to see a potential firing. Maybe they wouldn't do it in season, but I just think that for a team, I mean, his first 2 seasons, they come in, they make it to the playoffs both years, had pretty good regular seasons, but they lost in the wild card round each time. And so I think there's no doubt in my mind if the Dolphins don't make the playoffs this year, it just doesn't feel like McDaniels will stay around. It wouldn't be shocking to see him end up leaving and potentially getting fired if they don't make it back to the playoffs. And then if that were to happen, it's like there's a ton of questions. What do you do with the offense? Tua's still under contract. I was looking at some numbers, and Tua's dead cap hit if you cut him pre-June 1st after the season, $79.2 million. So I think that you still need to build around Tua because he's here. And there's just a lot of questions now in Miami. Now, maybe it's just a bad performance. Maybe they can bounce back, get back to what they used to look like, but I'm not too sure. I still, even if they play some good football, they haven't shown it in the playoffs. They haven't shown it against some of the best teams in the NFL. So it's a tough spot for the Dolphins. Now on to last night's game. That was a crazy starting Sunday night football game, the first one of the season. It was, as not being a Bills fan and a Ravens fan, you can sort of watch more a little bit calm, because I was thinking to myself, man, if I was a Bills fan here, down, whatever it was, 8 or so, I would be very, very concerned right now. But the way it ended, the Ravens just made another mistake, which is something that has happened with them a lot of times in the playoffs, especially, and it's something that happened the last time they played the Bills in the playoffs. And I really think the story of this game comes down to Derrick Henry's fumble, and I saw him talk about it after the game. He took that responsibility because in this game, the Bills end up with 0 turnovers. Ravens end up with 1 turnover. And the fact that Henry fumbles this ball with 3 minutes remaining, if he doesn't fumble that ball, odds are, there's a very good chance the Ravens win that game potentially. Now, maybe you punt it there and the Bills have a shot, but he fumbles it, gives the Bills very good field position, and then they, go in and end up getting that victory. And so I think for the Ravens, we all know how good Lamar Jackson is. He showed it last night. He played nearly perfect football. Same with Josh Allen. And I think for this Ravens team, it's like when you're looking at what you think they can do in the playoffs, they haven't gotten to, a Super Bowl in a while, and you have to, pass Patrick Mahomes. And it just feels like, when you're playing these games against these really, really good teams like the Bills, if they're not making any mistakes, it really comes down to who's going to make that mistake in the end of the game. And the Ravens made that big mistake. And also, the last drive, Jair Alexander got beat a few different times. It was tough for him there. And I think he's still a good corner. Wasn't great in this game. And I think now looking ahead for the Ravens, there's no doubt. They're going to be in the playoffs with the way Lamar Jackson was playing. They're making the playoffs. They're one of the best teams in the NFL. But the other concern is this defense. They allowed 41 to Josh Allen, and that's the thing. When you have someone like Lamar Jackson, it's unfortunate when you have the defense struggling like that, just because it's like you can be perfect like Lamar was and still end up losing a game like that. So the Ravens defense needs to bounce back in a big way. And I think if you're the Buffalo Bills, Josh Allen, he is so talented, and I am picking the Bills to go to the Super Bowl this year, have them facing the Packers, but I just think we saw last night an incredible performance from Josh Allen, and Lamar was great as well, but as I said, when you have a mistake there, Josh Allen, he makes the most of it. The Bills end up winning that game. So crazy game, crazy Sunday to start the season. Those are my thoughts on a lot of the games from the first week. If you want more NFL content in the future, feel free to subscribe down below. Also for in-game thoughts, feel free to follow me on Twitter at LukeBeller3. But thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.